Hello everybody, and today we're looking at a game played, I think, in round 2 or 3 of the ESSA Online Olympiad Selection tournament, which was hosted by Hendrik, and well, Joe and Hendrik are competing over who owns Chessa, and we're still waiting for some of the verdicts. So some of the players playing this tournament got chosen, and Joe also made his recommendation of which players were to be chosen. We actually have at the black pieces here, Mr. Grandmaster Kenny Solomon. He is one of the players that managed to get into the team. Playing against aNaartjie with the white pieces, better known as Matt Pon, or I don't know what he's better known as the Naartjie or as Matt Pon, with the white pieces. And this game was actually stunning. It's a rapid game, 15 minutes aside plus 5 seconds, and let's dive into it. Why don't we? Okay, so Matt Pon here with e4, we get a Sicilian, and then suddenly right here, bishop g2, g6, and after castles, the move knight to f6. Actually, the first interesting moment. I don't know if it's that interesting, but it's actually a novelty. This hasn't been played before, but actually it has. It's just a transposition. Usually you start with bishop to g7 and then knight f6, and stuff like rook e1, c3, or d4. But going knight f6 immediately is interesting. It's a novelty by Mr. Grandmaster Kenny Solomon. But we have rook e1, bishop g7, and the move c3. Now, Matt Pon's keeping the options open of d3 or d4, so Kenny does not know what's going to happen next. But if you've been watching this channel, you know Matt Pon won't be playing d4. He doesn't like these open Sicilian lines. d3 is definitely what's going to come. I don't know if Grandmaster Kenny Solomon is not watching my channel. I suppose he's not, because he went e5 here. And this is actually all prep for d4. Castling immediately is also possible, but we have the move d3 as can be expected, and now castling. So there's a bit of contesting for this d4 square. So if there was a shove, black would have probably been fine trading and still having some central play, but that's not what Matt Pon goes for. By the way, this position has been reached many times before. It's only that knight f6 move that was a novelty, but we've transposed into a position that has been seen many times before. a3 and now b5. a3 not the most common move. b5 on point response. Actually, this position has only been reached once, and now something like knight d2 is possible, or h3, and these are actually options when watching the game that I thought Matt would go for, but since it's a rapid game, he goes for b4, going for a bit more space. But Kenny plays the precise move here, and now this is actually a new game. The move a5, also possible was just a6, and that would not have been a novelty. But Kenny has been through this line, obviously, because a5 is the best recommended computer move. And now just let's take a second and evaluate the position. This is a point that intrigued me quite a lot, because there's a lot of symmetry, right? So we've got the castled kings with the fianchetted bishops and knight over here. But I do slightly like black more. Simply because it feels like he somehow scored a tempo somewhere. While white has got the move rook e1, and this rook isn't here yet, black has got this move instead. And while the knight is still on b1, it feels like black is equalized with tempo, and actually he might be slightly ahead with tempo, because if we consider these pawns and how far they've advanced versus these three, it just feels like black has won some time. And well, he's the first to actually start hitting on the queen side now, with trying to open a file and gain more activity than white currently has. So here Matt comes up with a very interesting response, c4. So the idea of playing for d4 is no longer there after c4, but it does strike at black's queen side pawns. So I like it a lot, the move, but now we can clearly see, sorry, how do I... Okay, so let's get rid of the highlights for a second. I just want to point this out. This is a pawn, if it was here, then it would be symmetrical, but the knight would also need to be here. So there's like one tempo to get the knight in the same place, and let's consider this knight getting into the same place, this rook or something being the tempo. But then white is actually behind with that slight tempo still in time, even though he just pushed b4. So black is the first one to call the shots here. But what is interesting, however, is white's ability to attack this b5 square, and that is pretty crucial here, and it became a characteristic of the game. Kenny went for a takes b. It makes a lot of sense just to open up the file, because either way you're going to capture, if you're going to take on c4, then b5 is also possible. So you need to decide if you want this pawn to be a protected passed pawn via the a pawn, or what you want to do. So I think his decision was sound: take with the a pawn and open the rook's file. However, Matt goes c takes b, and here Kenny makes a slight okay, let's just call it a mistake. Probably his best move here would just be knight to d4. And one of the points is actually that after knight takes d4, you can go c takes d4, making use of that pin on the a file. So, okay, so let's say a4 just to protect this pass pawn. Then just simply bishop d7, and that attacks the pin pawn. And how are you actually going to defend this rook from this threat? You're going to have to play something like bishop to let's say bishop to b2, in which case black is still perfectly fine going bishop e6 and playing with a bit of space over here. He should be able to find a lot of counterplay, and he's also threatening d5. So Kenny really had the option here to go for something way more aggressive, and especially because the b pawn would be around, he'll still be able to put pressure on a4. Let's just say the line continued, something like this. I don't know, my evaluation is that black is perfectly fine and probably playing for the win here. These pass pawns I don't find too threatening anymore. In any case, but what happened in the game, and Kenny should probably not have gone for this, is knight to b8. And suddenly it feels a bit slow. But he's still in the game. This took him about 3 minutes to calculate, so he did consider knight d4 as an option. But probably he was looking at e takes, which doesn't look too great. We have a4, and now we see that these pawns are very nicely connected. Bishop d7, same threat in mind. Take the pawn, play against the rook that is pinned, or the pin on the rook. And now h6, so bishop e2 just defending the rook, and now h6 is a bit of a move that doesn't do too much. Here Kenny thought for a minute. And what is funny is that the computer seems to like bishop e6, yet again going for this central advancement. Maybe there's something to be said for aligning your play along these lines and, well, clearing up a square for your knight, etc., etc. But h6 I did not like too much, just slightly slow. Now knight b d2 makes sense, go for the c4 square, but now Kenny plays bishop e6 after 4 seconds because he knows knight c4 is coming. It does come, bishop takes c4 now, and okay, maybe he could have let this knight live on, and well, it's not too clear what to do, but maybe letting the knight live would have been alright. D takes c4, and suddenly these pawns have somehow slipped through into black's camp. He's got something to worry about. We've got queen c7 now, after a second, and knight to d2. This knight is going somewhere. Let's see where. Knight b d7, queen c2, rook e8, and now knight b3. This is where the knight's going, clearing up way for that a5 advancement. Knight f8, bishop h3. Good square here by Matt. Always a good option when you've fianchetted the bishop, but you know there's no room for it really to play. Bishop h3 makes sense, and h5. Knight e6 was also possible, but we can continue. a5. Definitely white is now pushing with his pass pawns on the queen side, so bishop c1. Kenny's trying something on the king side, however, with his knights. Bishop takes e6 now. He says, you know what, in this game, the knights are going to be important. I could find some space for my knights. Rook takes e6, queen d3, rook e8, b6 now, queen b8, and getting the feeling that it's really bad here for black. Knight to f6 was a blunder. Rook a6 would have been slightly better, but bishop e3, white is still very comfortable, but stopping these pawns immediately might have been slightly better. In any case, knight f6 playing with tempo against the queen, queen c6, it slips out of there, and we do get a similar situation. bishop g5, rook c8, and queen d5. And actually, here's a very important point. Bishop takes f6. Still making the same point that the knights are worth more. Pre-move, actually, bishop takes f6, a recapture. It's interesting to see that on the notation. Lichess pre-move, as this game was played on pre-move, on Lichess, it was possible to use 0 time with that move. Over the board, I'm not sure how that would be calculated. Rook a1, rook c6 now. So black has got a big issue. Look at this nice formation by white. But how's white going to get those pawns forward? And rook d5, king f8, a blunder. Instead, something like rook a8 and just waiting around seemed to benefit Kenny. Just throw those rooks back and forth. But king f8, trying to march a piece closer to the game. Now, it's in this position that Matt played rook d1, but there's actually a very, very nice move for him to play over here. And I'm going to give you guys time to probably find it. So pause the video here and see if you can find the winning continuation for white. Okay, well done. If you did find it, it's obviously not rook d1, which was played in the game. But after king f8, the winning continuation was rook takes on d6. And you need to realize that you need to recapture this rook, right? Because now the defense is gone of the c5 pawn, so knight takes is possible. And also just simply threatening the rook. So either move the rook or allow knight takes c5. But it seems like knight takes c5 isn't coming in any case, so take the rook. And knight takes c5, hitting the queen. Actually, where does the queen go? Not many good options, so you can play the little intermezzo, rook takes a5, hitting white's queen. Queen takes, and then queen b8. And here's the big threat, just simply b7, and nothing to do here for black. Pawns defended, queen a8 is coming, rook a1 is coming, so you can even trade that queen and just play rook a8 if you really want to. But you can just see that this is over. Even slight tactics might exist because of knight d7 deflections. Really a nightmare position for black over here. But that wasn't played. Rook e1 was played, and bishop e7. F3 now. F4 is also possible, and just the trading and playing like this. But in any case, F3, still a slow move. And now rook a8. Kenny's starting his weight. So now finally, after this whole while, Matt decides it's time to break open this pawn chain. Not via rook takes d6, which no longer works, but knight takes c5. Rook takes c5, rook takes c5. And actually, Matt plays a very accurate idea here, rook d7. So that exchange just to get the rook to d7 and then to get b7 makes a lot of sense. Queen b8. Also, it was totally possible to play rook takes a5 if Kenny had picked up on, well, if he had picked up on the intermezzo, but he didn't back there. He played queen b8 also as a pre-move. He expected rook to d7. So now we get b7 and rook a7. So there's a bit of a blockade. b3 now trying to deflect the queen. Rook to d1, running back for that pawn. Okay, so instead of running back for the pawn after b3, I'm going to give you guys another moment to pause the video. A lot of you guys might know this already if you've been through this game. But what is the winning move here for white? Okay, I'll show it. The winning move is a rook to c7. And the point is that queen can't capture just simply because of queening, and, well, this is obvious, the rook's also going away. Goodbye, Mr. Rook. And, well, you're threatening rook to c8, so if you just realize that the queen couldn't take, then it's easy to see that. But instead, Matt didn't, and he got afraid of that b3 advancement, so played rook d1. b2 now. And actually, Matt would have still been winning if he had forsaken play along the d file and just remaneuvered the rook to the b file and taken this pawn. But, okay, instead, sorry, after b2, he played queen c6, still trying to enter along d7. But now bishop d6 tactically works because the rook can never take on d6, and if there's a trade, there's going to be a b1 queen with check. So nice spot there by Kenny. King to g2 now, stepping out of the check. King f2 maybe slightly better, but now king to g7. And now rook b1 is a bit too slow because of queen c7, and this pass pawn is now guarded. And suddenly Matt is not winning anymore, but he finds a continuation that should be giving him a draw. So liquidation, queen takes c7, bishop takes, rook takes, and now rook takes a6, and b8 equals queen. And what I'm going to show you now is, okay, well, this is supposed to be a drawn situation. Psychologically, Matt Pawn did not get the win because of missing moves like rook to c7, or just simply rook to b1, trying to keep those pass pawns over there. He now plays rook e8, loses the pawn on the c square, and actually it's still okay for him. He needs to find dynamic options. I think king h3 is a bit weird. Maybe just liquidating pawns here, or getting the king more active, claiming that if this rook ever goes for the h pawn, you're at least getting this c pawn, and that c pawn is your big problem. But instead goes for king h3, which is a strange option, and never really gets rid of that c pawn. And suddenly, while this is still okay for him, it's supposed to be a draw, I think psychologically he's already kind of in a bad space here, and this is where the Grandmaster really shows his strength. Rook to d1 check here, going after this e-pawn, gets the e-pawn, and after rook e5 and this check, king e7, the GM is suddenly picking up the g-pawn as well, and Matt Pawn resigns. A game that went horribly wrong for him, no longer has a chance to draw this, and Kenny just suddenly plays for more. He smells his chance and says, you know what, I'm going to win this game. Great sportsmanship from Kenny over there, just hanging in on the game. Very sad for the aNaartjie, and that game definitely wasn't easy for him. Thanks for watching. I'm going to be back with a game soon. I'm going through some of the SL Online games, so subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so to keep up to date with the games. A lot of exciting games still coming your way. Thanks for watching.